Solitude. Most people run from it. They treat it like a curse, a symptom of failure or rejection. But what if we've been seeing it all wrong? What if solitude is actually the purest form of freedom in a world that pulls us in every direction? With its noise, expectations, and constant social obligations, choosing to be alone becomes a powerful act of liberation. Imagine waking up in a place that is entirely your own. Every object, every sound, every moment of silence answers only to you. There's no need to explain, no one to please, no pressure to fit in or perform. Just you, in control. That's not loneliness. That's sovereignty. This kind of solitude isn't cold or empty. It's complete autonomy. It's the rare chance to move at your own rhythm, to breathe without apology, to choose without guilt. In a society that never stops demanding our time, our energy, our answers, just being with yourself, without the need to justify anything, is a radical act of self-respect. It's not about isolation. It's about presence, your presence. Being alone doesn't mean lacking something. It can mean finally having everything that matters. Your peace, your pace, your voice, and here's the deeper truth. It's not always the places that hurt us, it's the people. We blame the job, the school, the daily routine, calling them toxic or oppressive. But often it's not the system itself, it's the relationships inside them. It's the manipulative coworker, the teacher who belittles, the friend who competes, the partner who controls. Human connection can be beautiful, but it can also be a battlefield full of silent wars and invisible wounds. That's the paradox of being human. We crave connection, yet so often it's in solitude that we finally feel safe. We humans have the strange ability to bring both joy and healing, and at the same time, to cause deep wounds. Every interaction, no matter how small, carries an emotional cost. Constantly being around others means we're always juggling expectations, putting on masks, pretending to be okay when we're not, or swallowing discomfort just to keep the peace. We're forced to face traits in people that wear us down: arrogance, jealousy, selfishness, deceit. And over time, this emotional noise builds into exhaustion. That's why in a world filled with tension and forced smiles, solitude starts to feel like oxygen. It becomes a refuge, a space where we're not hurt, not drained, and not obligated to carry the weight of people we never chose to carry. The relief of being alone goes far beyond just being without company. It's about being free from the emotional damage others can cause. It's the comfort of not needing to explain, not having to endure, not being constantly exposed to someone else's drama or toxicity. And this isn't a modern insight. It's a truth old as time. Some of the greatest minds in history didn't fear solitude. They embraced it as a gift. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that only in solitude are we truly free. Around others, he argued, we're always edited versions of ourselves, filtered, censored, careful. Alone, we finally get to be raw, real, and unpolished. Friedrich Nietzsche took it even further. To him, society wasn't just demanding, it was limiting. A place where the individual was pressured to follow herd-like morals, where personal truth was traded for acceptance. For Nietzsche, stepping away from the crowd wasn't withdrawal, it was transcendence. It meant creating your own truth, your own values, your own path. And that can only happen when you silence the world around you long enough to hear your own voice clearly. Being with people can sometimes cloud our mind with noise. But solitude, that's where the real work begins. The inner construction of the self, the breaking and rebuilding, the discovery of strength you didn't know you had. True solitude isn't just about being physically alone. It's about finally being free from the expectations that others place on your shoulders. It's in that quiet, in that space where the world stops pressing in, that the soul finally stretches out and breathes. That's where freedom lives. That's where transformation begins. When we're alone, something magical happens. We finally get to take off the mask. No more pretending, no more trying to please, impress, or adjust to someone else's expectations. There's a deep sweetness in that kind of freedom. We can walk around the house in silence or sing loudly without fear of judgment. We can speak our mind without filtering every word. We can dive into weird hobbies, explore what makes us feel alive, or simply sit still, free from the pressure to entertain, explain, or perform. Alone, we return to a version of ourselves that's raw, honest, and whole. Without the constant eyes of the world on us, we rediscover something rare: authenticity. Nobody's there to critique our tastes, second-guess our opinions, or measure the way we move, and that's liberating. The pressure to be politically correct, the silent rules of social etiquette, the invisible expectations of how we should act, all that dissolves when no one's around to judge. Alone, the need to impress disappears, and what remains is something far more meaningful: truth. This is where we hear our real voice again. This is where the I is no longer suffocated by the weight of us. In this quiet space of freedom, we begin to move at our own rhythm, guided not by trends, norms, or likes, but by inner desire. We're no longer on display. We're no longer performers in the theater of social life. Especially in an age where we're constantly watched, whether in public or through the glowing screens of social media, unplugging from the audience is an act of rebellion. Solitude returns us to ourselves. It's in this stillness, in this sacred pause, that we remember what it feels like to just be, without needing to prove anything. Many spiritual paths have long understood this truth. Solitude isn't a problem to solve. It's a gift to embrace. For thousands of years, spiritual leaders, monks, sages, and seekers have stepped away from the noise to find something deeper. Even Buddha taught that to reach true clarity, one must first withdraw from the world. The Sutta of the Rhinoceros, a beautiful Buddhist text, paints a picture of walking alone, like the rhinoceros itself, strong, solitary, free. In that image, solitude becomes not a punishment, but a path. A space where we're no longer tangled in the expectations, desires, or emotional traps of others. Being alone in that sense is powerful. It clears the mind, it frees the heart, it lets us shed the extra weight we didn't even know we were carrying. There are fewer cravings to chase, fewer masks to hold up, fewer roles to pretend. And in the quiet, something profound emerges. Peace, not just around us, but within us. Solitude becomes a rich and fertile ground for something many people have forgotten: the practice of being with oneself. In that quiet space, meditation, reflection, and deep contemplation are no longer distant ideas. They become natural. They arise not out of obligation, but from a genuine desire to reconnect with something deeper, quieter, and more honest. Contrary to popular belief, stepping away from the crowd isn't always running away. Sometimes it's the only way to return home, to your center, a space without noise, without judgment, where your soul can finally speak and be heard. This silence doesn't suffocate, it heals. Far from the chaos of everyday life, solitude also reconnects us with something just as forgotten: nature. That pure, untouched rhythm of the world outside human interference. In our fast-paced, hyper-connected lives, we lose touch with the earth, with the wind, with the calmness of trees and the simplicity of flowing water. But in solitude, that connection returns. Philosopher Henry David Thoreau sought exactly that. He walked away from society and lived alone in a simple cabin by Walden Pond. In that silence, with no distractions, he didn't just find peace. He found a truer way to live, one that wasn't driven by the rush, the pressure, or the endless comparisons of modern life. This return to nature is more than physical, it's spiritual. As the noise of society fades, the heartbeat of the earth becomes audible, the rhythm of the seasons, the stillness of a forest, the quiet power of a lake. These speak truths we rarely hear when surrounded by screens, deadlines, and small talk. To be alone in nature is to remember something ancient, who we are, where we belong, and what truly matters. Out there, no one is expecting anything from you. There's no performance, no pressure, just presence, just being. Unlike the draining, energy exchanges of daily social life, where we often need to defend ourselves, adapt or perform, nature asks for nothing and gives everything. It doesn't judge, demand, or criticize. It simply exists and invites us to do the same. And in this wordless acceptance, we often find a sense of belonging far deeper and more authentic than the one we struggle to maintain within human systems. Here, there's no need to prove yourself. You are already enough. Nietzsche, as always, saw solitude through a different lens. For him, it wasn't just about peace. It was about power. A chance to break free from society's chains and question everything we've been taught. In his view, solitude wasn't for the faint of heart. It was a necessary rebellion. He warned that the herd teaches obedience, submission, and the suppression of our true instincts. Stepping away then wasn't optional. It was the path to becoming fully alive, fully free. In Solitude, Nietzsche saw a laboratory for transformation, not escape, but awakening. When we choose to step away from the noise of the world, something powerful begins to unfold. We create space, not just around us, but within us. In that space, the individual finally has room to question, to rethink, and to build a life not shaped by politics, religion, or social trends, but by personal truth. For Nietzsche, solitude wasn't a retreat. It was a forge, a place where the free spirit sharpens its edges. Yes, the price is real. Walking alone means giving up the comfort of being constantly validated, letting go of the support offered by familiar systems and the everyday buzz of company. But what you gain is priceless, the power to become the author of your own life, to stop following scripts and start writing your own. In this light, solitude is anything but empty. It's a space brimming with potential, where bold ideas are born, where fresh ways of thinking come to life, where inner strength grows undisturbed by the weight of outside approval. You no longer have to compromise. You no longer have to explain. Alone, you're free to be whole, to live without editing your soul for someone else's comfort. This is a kind of freedom that crowded rooms and social roles can never offer. And it's in this silence that many people, sometimes for the first time, come face to face with their true identity. As Schopenhauer said, a person can only be fully themselves when they are alone. That's because authenticity needs space to breathe, and solitude gives it that space. Being constantly surrounded by others means we're always adjusting, changing our words, softening our opinions, shaping our personality to meet what others expect of us. These invisible expectations can quietly deform us. But when we free ourselves from those gazes, from that constant, subtle judgment, we also free ourselves from the pressure to perform. We no longer need to act a part. We don't need to explain why we like what we like or apologize for being different. Alone, we can rediscover what it means to move at our own pace, follow our odd curiosities, wear what we love, and speak our thoughts without hesitation. And in doing so, we reconnect with something we often lose in society, the joy of simply being real. This freedom isn't just physical, it's mental and emotional. The mind stretches, relaxes, and deepens when it's not busy defending itself, comparing, or conforming. The noise of the world fades, and in its place, we hear something far more important: ourselves. In a world where so many are busy trying to fit in, solitude offers something rare and sacred: the chance to stop trying, the chance to live, not to perform, To exist, not to prove. To be, not to impress. And that might be the most radical, liberating act a person can choose. Even with all the beauty and power that solitude can offer, it's important to be honest. It's not always a blessing. It's not always a choice. And when being alone becomes excessive or involuntary, it stops being a peaceful escape and turns into emotional weight. It can bring sadness, confusion, and even lead to mental health struggles. Many people genuinely crave meaningful connections, but feel trapped by shyness, past traumas, constant rejection, or simply a life that hasn't offered many chances to bond with others. For them, solitude is not a sanctuary, it's a prison. It's not a space they chose, it's the one they were pushed into. And that distinction matters deeply. There's a world of difference between choosing to be alone and being left alone by circumstance. One feels like freedom, the other feels like punishment, and this video acknowledges both. Yes, sometimes it really is better to be alone than to feel invisible in a crowd or stuck in toxic company. But it's also true that no one should have to be alone when they desperately long for closeness. The real answer lies in balance, not a fixed formula, but a flexible rhythm that changes with who we are, how we feel, and what we're living through. Context matters. What feels like healing today might feel like isolation tomorrow. That's why solitude shouldn't be blindly glorified or unfairly feared. It deserves honesty and nuance. Finding the sweet spot between solitude and connection isn't always easy. It takes courage. Courage to say, I need time alone, even when others might not understand. And courage to walk away from places, people, or situations that drain or hurt us. In cases of emotional abuse or toxic dynamics, choosing solitude can be the bravest and healthiest decision we ever make. But many people stay, not out of love, but out of fear. Not because they enjoy company, but because they're afraid of what they'll face if they're ever alone. And that's the heart of it. Solitude forces us to face ourselves. When we're alone, there's nowhere to hide. No distractions, no noise, just us, raw, unfiltered. And for many, that's terrifying. It's easier to stay busy, to chase conversations, to stay plugged into social noise, than to sit quietly with the thoughts we've been avoiding. But ironically, the more we fear being alone, the more we end up depending on others to define who we are. We start outsourcing our self-worth, letting others tell us if we're lovable, valuable enough. And in doing so, we chain ourselves to cycles of disappointment and need. The key is learning to feel safe in our own company, not because we're rejecting the world, but because we've stopped rejecting ourselves. When we discover that we can enjoy our own presence, that we can validate our own feelings, listen to our own voice, something shifts. We become less needy, more grounded, more whole. We stop searching for rescue and start building inner peace. And from that place, not of lack, but of fullness, we're finally ready to connect with others in a healthier, freer, and more loving way. And so, when we finally make peace with our own solitude, something incredible happens. It stops being a source of fear or sadness and becomes a source of power. Loneliness, once seen as a burden, transforms into a kind of personal sanctuary. A place where strength grows quietly, a place where clarity sharpens. When we stop running from being alone and instead begin to embrace it, we start breaking free from emotional ties that once controlled us, especially the toxic ones. We no longer feel chained to relationships that drain us or trapped in roles that don't fit. We stop asking others for permission to be ourselves. Because real freedom isn't about being surrounded, it's about being centered. In this space of quiet self-reliance, we discover something few ever talk about: inner sufficiency. That quiet voice that says, I'm enough, even here, even now. The world teaches us to be afraid of silence, to fear empty rooms and solo moments, but those are often the very places where we find our deepest strength. It's better to be alone and free than surrounded and silently yearning for escape. It's better to walk your path with clarity than lose yourself trying to follow someone else's. When we choose solitude, not as rejection, but as an act of self-love, we reclaim our energy. We take our lives back into our own hands, and that changes everything. Because in the stillness, we begin to realize we were never really empty, just distracted, just buried under noise, under pressure, under expectations. Solitude doesn't create a void. It clears the clutter. It peels back the layers until we see what was always there: resilience, peace, creativity, direction. That strength doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't demand attention. It simply holds you up, quietly, when no one else is around to catch you. And once you've heard that voice inside, once you've felt that grounded power, you no longer fear being alone. You begin to trust yourself. In solitude, we find a kind of strength we never knew we were missing. Not the loud kind that the world rewards, but the kind that keeps us steady when life shakes. The kind that lets us walk away from what no longer serves us. The kind that reminds us we don't have to settle. We don't have to stay where we're not seen. We don't have to shrink ourselves just to belong. Because in the end, there's nothing lonelier than being surrounded by people who don't truly know you, and nothing more empowering than finally being enough for yourself.